There's a lot of inner work that has to be done in order for us to be more authentic, for us to peel away the stuff that got in the way of our birthright. We were born to be connected with people. And yet somehow along the way, we were shamed or whatever else it was, insert homophobic or misogynistic term here, but we were told we shouldn't be how we are being.
All right. 3, 2. Hello, and welcome to the Mindset Self-Mastery Show. I'm your host, Nick McGowan. Today on the show, we have Adam Dorsay. Adam, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm stoked to be with you, and the green room conversation was absolutely epic. You are definitely my people.
And I appreciate that. I love these sort of conversations. The amount of times that I have conversations where it's like, oh shit, we just need to hit record, go. This was totally one of those things. We started off talking about sports and getting into psychology and just all this different stuff.
Don't forget Philly, man. We talked Philly big time.
We can't forget Philly, but I'm sure most people that listen to this, if they're not from Philly, or if they're not a Birds fan or Sixers fan, are probably like, this fucking guy and his fucking Philly sports teams. You're probably just a little jealous because your team isn't in the Super Bowl, and we're moving along.
Absolutely. You have no idea of my envy. I'm so bummed because if you think about it, the Niners on paper have one of the greatest teams of all time, and yet for some reason they just couldn't make it win this year. So it was a painful season, as were the last few. But I hope they'll find their groove again.
Well, I saw something last night, I think it was, or the day before. Debo is walking around New Orleans in an AJ Brown jersey because he hates that they lost to Kansas City. Knows that the Eagles lost, and it's our chance to be able to redeem for the entire NFC, basically.
And as you say, redeem, I'm thinking of the word read. I mean, AJ with the book on the sideline. I mean, one of the most baller moves I have ever seen in any sport at any time. What a cool dude! What a cool dude! I'm gonna send him my book. The likelihood of it getting to him is low, but I will be sending him my book.
That's funny. I wonder how many people were like, "Oh shit, send him a book."
Exactly. I'm not anomalous. I think everybody's had that thought. Anybody who's written a book is like, "Oh, I got to get to AJ."
Yeah, he's probably like, "I can't even fucking read this much. Like, this is insane." I want to get into that a little bit because I think that's a big thing to talk about. Especially AJ Brown had even said like he was suicidal, and people can look at these big sports stars and think like, "Oh my God, you have all the things that you want. How could you be suicidal?" And it doesn't matter if you have all the money in the world, all the things. You also have a ton of pressure. There's a lot of shit that goes with it, which you can have the same feelings as a single parent or somebody who's just in a really tough spot trying to grow their business or something. But man, before we get into that, why don't you tell us what you do for a living and what's one thing most people don't know about you that's a little odd or bizarre?
All right. So I'm a psychologist in private practice. I serve primarily men. I gave a TEDx talk on men and emotions. Yes, they have emotions, and there are data that we need to explore from time to time to become more emotionally rich. I mean, if I was to tell you, hey, Nick, I'm going to put a whole bunch of, black electrical tape onto your dashboard of your car, you would like say, what the hell's wrong with you? And I'd say, well, if you're not listening to your emotions, it's basically the same thing. I mean, you don't know how full your gas tank is. You don't know, anything that you need to know when you're driving through life. And we can be basically driven by our emotions. We can act them out, or we can talk them out, or we can be in the driver's seat as it relates to our emotions. But done a podcast in my 250th episode. Love that. Just love sitting in either chair, whether I'm sitting in Nick's chair or my chair for this interview. I'm beyond stoked to do it. It's called SuperPsyched. My nickname in high school was Enthusiasm. It was given to me by the drummer of the band I was in. I was in a garage band, and the drummer was like, dude, you are Enthusiasm. And so SuperPsyched was kind of an obvious outshoot from that idea. I was born connecting to people, and that's one of the reasons I had to write this book. And I've created resiliency programs for, Facebook, where I worked for 4 years with their counterterrorism and child safety teams. And I'm continuing to do that work with other companies like DigitalOcean, where I've been for the last 7. Father of 2 boys, happily married, really stoked to be married. Call myself the Hair Club for Men psychologist. If you remember the Hair Club for Men guy, I would say I'm not just the president of the hair club from them, also a member. So I've sat on both sides of the room in the therapy office. I'm committed to doing therapy myself to this day. But I was into the service long before I thought I would be providing this service. And I think it's made me a better therapist, being on both sides of the room. And here are three things about me. First of all, I crack my nose. I don't know anybody else who cracks their nose, but literally I push on the side and it relieves certain head tension. I don't know why. I've always done it. That's a weird thing. Another weird thing, I speak fluent Japanese, and it coming out of my mouth, it looks odd, is all I can tell you. I lived in Japan for about 3 years. And I studied the language for 2 years in college, and just, you know, love Japan. And the third thing is I'm obsessed with numbers. Like, I think about numbers. I think about the relationships between them. And what's really weird is my younger son has this trait. So it appears to be genetic. I did not ever, to my knowledge, tell him about it. He just came upon it. So there's something in my genes that seems to predict that numbers are a thing to us. They're very meaningful.
There's sacred geometry, there's all the numbers, all the things that go into everything.
Nice.
And
right.
The world is made of math. But as an artist, sometimes that math goes right past me. My partner and I joke at different points, like if we have to build something or put something together, like I build a couch for our tiny house that has, it's like a toy chest in a sense. You can open up, put stuff in there. I put this thing in it and all that stuff. But I was like, I need help with this because I will math it wrong. I won't know. Like, it has to have a little bit more or a little less. And I started to do some of it, and I asked her stepdad to help, and he was like, put the tape measure down. Let me help you. I'm like, well, man, we want to talk music or like sales and shit like that. I'm all about it. But the math side, just sometimes, thank God for the calculators we have. Our Texas Instruments phone, basically, at this point.
Dude, that's the best. My older son actually took his room and he actually gave my wife and me, this is not the younger son who's obsessed with numbers, but my older son literally wrote out a blueprint of exactly how he wanted to design his room. So it was like the art and the math in this guy. And for art, I have got nothing. I've got nothing. If you want me to draw something and draw it with all of my greatest intention, it will look like the world's shittiest stick figure. So, and that is my best art. So I look to you and think, wow, isn't it great that there is diversity in terms of the gifts that we carry? I think, like in Lord of the Rings, somebody's got to be able to, be a Legolas and use an arrow. Somebody's got to be like a Gimli and use a hammer. And then you got the wizard with the magician. So fantastic. We need diversity in this way and in virtually every way. And so I'm a huge fan.
I'm a huge fan of diversity in general. And we don't have a long time on this episode, and I don't know if we should get into the politics of things. But I think I
usually stay out of that lane, but I have a feeling that you can infer.
Yeah, well, I can stay out of it. But I think realistically, from a top level of it, diversity is just like if everybody on the planet was like you who are listening, or you right here on the show with me, if everybody was like you, if everybody was like me, I would probably fucking hate it. Because I know I can be a dick.
Sure.
I can be so many different things. I can also be super awesome. But at the same time, I would just fucking hate it. And we think we would like it, but no. So we need diversity. We need these different things. But there's also little lessons that we can learn from each other.
Of course. And I'm just thinking in terms of marriage. Like, what if you offline, where you and I were talking about a personality typing system, a non-pathological typing system called the Enneagram, where each type is different. And it's one of my favorite and most sophisticated of them. My wife is a 3. I'm a 7. I'm more of the enthusiast and the excited person. She's like more of the, like, let's get stuff done. If I was married to a fellow 7 who was just like me, we'd stay up all night and we'd get nothing done. We would just be having a great old time, and we would be definitely SOL. So I'm so glad for the diversity in my own marriage, let alone in other teams. I mean, I had Temple Grandin, who is this brilliant, famous autistic woman who has all of these incredible gifts. And she was describing the Space Shuttle Columbia's disaster. And she said, if somebody had been on the team who had my visual strengths, that thing would not have blown up, because I would never have let the blueprints get by.
It would have changed the O-ring.
Would have been. That's right. She would have seen it.
Yeah.
She would have seen that. And so neurodiversity is a thing. I mean, cultural diversity is a thing. I've lived in Japan. I've lived in Spain. I mean, you learn so much when you get out of what you think is normal. And you find out, wait, there's so many different ways of doing this.
Yeah. Well, think about the podcast. How many incredible people have you met just having conversations either on your podcast or getting onto their podcast? Like, even if you and I talk a number of times throughout the rest of our lives, this will be one of those situations where it's like, you know what, man? I'm glad to know that that dude's alive. What a cool thing.
I feel that way about you, Nick. I mean, for sure. You make me happy. I'm happy that you're alive. And I love that you're in, Walter White's, suburbs,
backyard, yeah.
living in a tiny home. Got to give props to Walter White. Yeah, the one of the greatest characters of all time.
Oh yeah,
and it was full on Albuquerque. But what I'm driving at is, I mean, you are really cool, and you've already taught me something that I didn't even know about, this service where you can actually take care of people's pets for free.
Yeah.
And like, if we don't talk, like, what do we learn? Sure, we can learn from the internet and from Wikipedia and AI, but learning from a person over ideally a Philly pretzel,
nice, with some water ice.
Wait, exactly. Oh my God, water ice. Yeah, I mean, like, this is how we're supposed to be. This is how our brains are meant. I mean, sure, I'm not gonna take a shit on technology. I love technology, but not at the exclusion of what you and I are doing.
Yeah.
What you and I are doing is the way that we've behaved for the millennia. And our brains haven't changed for at least 35,000. Some estimate even 100,000. But our outside realities have changed so vastly. And so what you and I are doing right now, we can't lose this, man.
So everything is cyclical. And I've been on this planet for 40 years. I've seen some cycles. It's interesting to see like mullets and shit come back now. Because I'm like, I remember that was a thing when I was a kid, and then it wasn't a thing for a long time because it wasn't a thing.
It was a bad word for a long period.
And now people, my son... they're just all rocking it, like we talked about sports, and you asked about Kelsey and all that. The guy who replaced Kelsey was on the sideline last game because his back was hurt or whatever, and they flash over to him, and he looks like he is 82. All over, like just 1982, straight out of high school, this big curly fucking permish hair. And it's like, that's cool now.
That's the best.
But it's a cycle. So all this stuff is a cycle. I saw something last night about people were buying more books because of TikTok, which is a wild thing.
That's amazing. That's so counterintuitive. I did not know that.
I'm not on TikTok. I'm barely on social media at this point. I think there's some toxicity to it. The show got shadow banned, I assume, from Instagram pretty quickly because we talked about suicide and healing. And they were like, nope, we can't have that. But there's,
oh my gosh.
I think there are things where people will think, well, paper products are going to go away. People are no longer going to want to read. In-person conversations aren't going to happen. COVID, everybody got shut out, and then we're all on Zoom calls and meetings like this and all that. But it'll still, like water, will find a way where it'll just kind of move how it's going to move. But it does take us, tying into the emotion side, for us to be able to realize what's going on within us to then open ourselves to have these conversations. I'm going to out you right now, Adam. I think we're friends enough at this point. As a 7, you can have a conversation with fucking anybody about anything. The people that aren't 7s, the people that are a 3-2, may be a little harder. I mean, I'm a 4-3, so the 3 in me still wants to be seen and shown and all of that. But there are other people, like 9s of the world, where that's not their jam. They want to keep the peace. They want to keep all of that. But still just being able to have an open conversation with somebody in a space like this, that is a way for people to be able to learn something that isn't just a bullshit talking head on Instagram or TikTok or something like that. There's good stuff that's out there, but there's also just a lot of curated bullshit is the safest way to be able to put it. And I think for us to be able to have these conversations and talk deeply about the things that are impactful to us, that can open up to others. I'm glad that you brought up emotions. I'm a 4. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Enneagram, I'm fucking emotional. For those of you who listen to this show, you know it.
And probably one of the reasons they listen
Yeah,
because
they're like, this
they
guy's
relate.
nuts. Yeah.
No, they probably are like, yeah, thank you. You're speaking to a part of me.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying
And you're
that. It's a
talking
good
about the
point.
talking heads. I mean, you're talking about artifice. I mean, nobody wants to talk to somebody in a mask. I mean, come on, let's be real. Authenticity is such a big deal. And I was so stoked to see somebody like Brene Brown just come out and do a TED talk and
Yeah.
just be real. She wasn't expecting to get more than 1,000 hits, maybe 10,000, but then it went viral partially because she was real. When you think about the greatest music of all time, we love it because it's real. It hits a part of us. It connects with us. That's the reason I wrote this book on connection, is because I want people to feel connected to something that is real.
Yeah.
And even the definition for connection, which seems to be the precursor to everything we want, has not really been well defined. So, like, let's talk about how do we actually authentically connect to ourselves, to others, to the world, and something greater. Like, this is the jam. If we're going to live, if we're going to be alive while we're living, let's not be limp handshakes. Let's actually like show some freaking vitality.
There's work to be done, though. There's a lot of internal work to be done where certain people, and I'm sure like we joked about Philly. A thing about Philly that I've learned from different people all over the country is like, you guys are crazy. There's a lot of like anger and all of that. And like, yeah, sort of. But at the same time, we're passionate. Like, if we give a fuck, we'll let you know. If we don't give a fuck, we're still going to let you know, but we'll tell you and you'll totally understand. And if you don't,
my perception is that Philly folks are often kind of what we call a kind of a coconut presentation, hard on the outside, but so soft on the inside.
Real. Yeah.
Just like the night. I mean, I've met the nicest people in Philly, and sometimes in the first meeting, I'm like, God, that guy's kind of a hard ass.
Yeah.
It's like, go out and have a Yingling with the guy, and you find
lager.
out the guy's amazing. A lager with the guy, and you find out like the guy is just amazing, and will defend you in every which way.
Fight to
like,
the death. Yeah.
for sure. So I'm a fan, and I'm a fan of the diversity of this country. I mean, each state has really great attributes and virtues, and it's pretty incredible if you think about these united states and how diverse we are in terms of the cultural presentations. So I'm really grateful for that as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking for authenticity, and so are you. I mean, I was trained actually, not to self-divulge. And I listened to a really good lecture by a super brilliant psychologist. And he said, you know what? Judicious use of self-disclosure helps build the relationship. And these are the things that people end up actually growing from. So I made a choice to start doing that both clinically, and I outed myself as a person who's suffered with depression, who's suffered with anxiety, who's had ADHD and dyslexia, and life has not been a bowl of cherries the whole time. I've always shown like a happy face, but sometimes on the inside, I was like crumbling and feeling like there is no future, there is no hope. So I relate to this thing called life. And you're right, there's a lot of inner work that has to be done in order for us to be more authentic, for us to peel away the stuff that got in the way of our birthright. We were born to be connected with people, and yet somehow along the way, we were shamed, or whatever else it was, insert homophobic or misogynistic term here, but we were told we shouldn't be how we are being. And so we basically walk around with armor. And so the trust, the courage it takes to break through that armor and the pain that is incurred as we are healing, it is like, I mean, it's like lancing a festering pussy wound. You have to do it, but it hurts along as you're doing it.
Oh my God. Yeah. And it can also be difficult. Like, I have conversations with people that are way deep into their path, well on their journey, 40, 50 years deep into it. Others that are just starting off, and there's wisdom and experience that you can get from any part of life. I could talk to some 16-year-old kid that could say something and go, hadn't thought about that. Likewise with an 85-year-old or whatever.
For sure.
But for us to be able to, self-awareness is the biggest thing. I think for us to be able to actually be self-aware, to understand, I'm feeling these sort of ways and I don't know why. Or like what I was saying with the Philly people, where they just be like, well, they're really angry. Maybe they are, but I also suspect that some of that is generational and regional trauma that's still in their bodies that they haven't gotten rid of. They also just wear it as a badge of honor because I get up, I put my fucking shoes on, I do these fucking things and fuck these people and blah, blah, blah. And like, what the fuck? But for us to be self-aware, and to seek our own authenticity. And it's not a buzzword salad sort of thing. Like, we're just not saying the word just so it's like, these are the things that'll get more likes and shares and all that nonsense. This is like, who you are is who you are. But we all go, I want to be so unique. A lot of people do. I want to be so unique. I want to be like that guy. That doesn't make any sense, but it can be hard not to in the world of information, in social media, and all of those things. So, tie into this kind of quickly here. I know you got a stop soon, but tie in how emotions and how the work that you do ties into that authenticity and what people can take from that to be able to use and learn from it.
Absolutely. So one of the things I do with guys I work with is I help them identify emotions. Oftentimes they're only able to identify like simple kind of surface emotions like annoyed and stressed. And oftentimes annoyed means I'm angry. It also can mean I'm sad and hurt and I'm actually grieving. And stressed often means I'm scared. But we go, so there's joy is a hard one for people to even admit to. Like joy, like what the hell is that? So we want to experience the colors of life. I mean, we might get a 96-inch LED TV and we talk about how amazing the color is. Well, what are we doing inside our bodies in terms of emotions? We really need to listen to those. One of the things I hear all the time is a middle-aged man who says, yeah, when I got down on a knee to ask that woman to get married, I knew I shouldn't, but I was told to shit or get off the pot. So I did. But I knew it was wrong really deep in my guts. So I really try to help men because I've been there. I try to help men give voice to their emotions, figure out what they mean and what to do with them. What's the best use? Sometimes it's just noticing that it's there and that's enough. And the emotion goes away. Or, because they feel like they're going to stay forever, but they don't. In some cases, it's an incentive to quit a job or to leave a relationship or to say, you know what, this friendship is not serving me. This friend is the exact opposite of Ben Affleck in Good Will Hunting. The guy, I love that scene because Ben Affleck is such a good friend to Matt Damon. He says, listen, I want you out of Southie. I don't want to see you on a Friday night drinking a beer with me, wasting your life. Go get it. And we become the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time. I really believe that. That was something that was said by Jim Rohn many years ago, and I don't know if there's actually been scientific studies to corroborate it, but I believe it. You got to choose your friends wisely. We got to be more intentional, and a lot of that comes from emotions. I mean, Anthony Damasio out of MIT actually examined what happens to the brain when all of the emotional centers are gone. We can't make decisions without our emotional centers. No decisions happen without factoring in emotions as a data point. So, yeah, we can act all hard and walk through life like whoa, 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 whoa. But we're not gonna. We're basically walking through life with armor. We need to find a way to take off the armor. Sometimes we need that armor. Sometimes we're in unsafe situations. And I'm not saying walk through life, with belly up as if you're a dog. But I'm saying I'm saying have more range. One of the things we know that is central to psychological health is cognitive flexibility versus cognitive rigidity. We don't want to be rigid. We want to be flexible. We want to have range. We can't just be one thing. When I was growing up back in the 80s, you're talking about 82, I know that haircut. I mean, what we're talking about was we had 3 versions of masculinity that I was aware of that I can name right now. One of one, James Bond. Another one, serious hardcore rock star. The other one was like the super jock, like Joe Montana. You get my era. But what I'm driving at is I identified with none of those exactly. There needs to be greater expanded definitions of what being any gender means. But since I specialize in working with men, I'm talking about masculinity here. We need a wider range of what that means. And thankfully, we got Jim from The Office, very different expression of masculinity. It's definitely a dude that we want to hang out with. We've got people who are like some of the we've got Tyrion from Game of Thrones, one of my all-time favorite versions of masculinity, in the form of a dwarf who becomes the most charming. He's probably a 7 on the Enneagram. I loved him. Absolutely hilarious and genius and kind, transformed. We saw him at the very beginning. So yeah, what I'm hoping for is that people will find their thing, their truth, because we know that we're actually even able to lift more weight as we're bench pressing when we say something that is true versus something that is not true. If you say something that is patently false while you're trying to bench your max and exert your massive, for many, there are some people who can, but for most of us, we will bench harder and stronger when we are in our truth. That is interesting.
Oh yeah. There's a pendulum swing to it as well. You don't want to wear the armor like you're saying constantly, but there are times where it's probably not
Definitely
safe
needed.
and needed. Just like when people will say, if it's Mother's or Father's Day, and they're like, if your mom or dad are around, you need to go see them. But you have to add in if it's safe to, and that goes for all situations. Like you got to be able to show your emotions if it's safe to. And there's also systems that come into play. Some people, it's not safe for them to just be how they are. And that sucks. And that is really difficult for them to be able to figure that out and figure out what their authenticity is and who they truly are, while the rest of the world is telling them you can't be, or some guy in some big office is signing a piece of paper to say you're not allowed to be, or you can't do this and can't do that. And you still have to find your way through it. It can be easier for some people to find some things. It can be difficult for others. But for those that are on their path towards self-mastery, what sort of advice would you give them?
I would really want them to find their truth. And truth is a fluid thing. But asking yourself good questions, not crap questions. Like I'm going to, this is a stupid example, but it's real. Let's say I lost my wallet, which actually happened a few weeks ago. I could ask myself, how could you be such an idiot? Or in my case, how could you be such a fucking idiot? And that is basically like a Google search in my brain. Oh, how could I be such a fucking idiot? Well, I'll get 100 results of times that I was an idiot, but that doesn't get me any closer to my wallet. A better question is, where did you see it last? We want to basically cultivate a wiser mind that asks good quality questions to ourselves, because we're constantly in dialogue with ourselves. The question is, are we asking ourselves good questions? Are we asking ourselves crap questions? Are we feeding ourselves with compassion, or are we feeding ourselves with absolute self-shaming statements? We don't do well under the supervision of a tyrant, a tormentor. We want a kind mentor mind. And that will help us basically pave the way for our more authentic self to show itself. So I started asking myself better questions, like where do you see it last? Who else could you ask? I asked my wife, she didn't know. Then I finally went through my calendar and asked myself, where was I over the past 2 days? One thing that wasn't written down was that I was actually at the tailor. I was getting my jeans tailored. My wallet was probably in the jeans. I called the tailor and she said, "Oh yeah, I've got your wallet." And I was like, "Why didn't you got my number? Why didn't you call me?" But I didn't say that. I was thinking that myself. I'm like, this is probably the last thing I'm going to, be doing with you. I think I'm going to find another tailor who would call me to tell me. But regardless, I asked myself, it was the byproduct of asking better questions. That is a stupid and simple example of how we can go through life. If we ask ourselves better questions, if we basically bring in a kinder coach, a Phil Jackson, a Steve Kerr into our head, we want to be in dialogue with that, the part of your brain that believes in you, that talks to yourself as if you're its best friend, that says, hey, let's find out, let's get curious. Who are you? Why is this not working? What is it that you're needing? Basic, big, open-ended questions, not the yes nos, but the big how, why, what, where, when, these types of questions. And that is cheering for you. People on the outside may shit on us, but it's our absolute need to not do that, to not buy into that. We do not get better from self-flagellating. Self-compassion is the way. The Navy SEALs use it. They get better and faster results from it. Chris Germer, who's one of the greatest researchers out of Harvard on this topic, told me this on my podcast. And I'm so grateful to him and Kristen Neff, who've been like the pioneers. If you want good outcomes, if you want self-mastery, self-compassion, speaking to yourself kindly, using a wiser mind, asking good questions, hanging out with people who believe in you, thinking intentionally, like, who do I want to spend my time with? You brought up the parents. Don't just go see your parents because they're parents. If they are actually traumatizing to you, figure out ways to engage with them or not. But that's your right. And I also believe that our birthright is joy, happiness, and vitality.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's a great way to put that. Something to add would be, it can be really difficult if you don't do your internal work to then show grace to yourself. If there are traumas and situations that have happened in the past that make you feel a certain way because you're automatically triggered, then you're basically fighting uphill. And this is coming from somebody with massive experience with this, because I've gone through that. I'm still going through those things. We're all on a lifelong journey. But doing that internal work will help with those, to be able to be in a better spot to go, well, I've dealt with this stuff before. Where did I leave my wallet? Instead of going, you fucking idiot. And just being like, oh, I put the wallet, it's in my fucking pants. Okay. And, going along, instead of just beating yourself up, which is typically based on some sort of trauma.
And by the way, Nick, my first question to myself was, how could you be such a fucking idiot? And then I stopped myself.
Yeah.
So we can always pivot. We can always hit Control Alt Delete. We can always change the system defaults. But one of the most important things is catch yourself in the act. Use a blue pen. You don't need to use a red pen and say bad, bad, bad you. Just like, hey, is this serving you or is this not serving you? And for sure, that question did not serve me. And I did find my wallet, which was pretty great. And turns out I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
So that was like, don't deceive yourself. You're not.
But I have to say that I'm sure if we had like those sort of situations turned into like an animation or something, it'd be fucking hysterical. Because there are times like even dealing with stuff with like our tiny house where I'm outside cursing like a little cartoon because I'm like working through that shit on my own. And then I'm fine.
Guess what, Nick? Guess what, brother? This is going to be a Nick and Adam collab. We got to do this. Let's make the
animations. All right, I'm in.
I'm all in, man. That'd be so fun.
Oh,
That'd be a great way of illustrating
That'd be the real shit where people are like, "What the fuck is this? Where the fuck is my wallet? You're an idiot. Fuck you.
I'm all in, man.
Fuck you, brain." Well, man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate being on here. We could probably talk a lot more, and I hope that we do at some point.
Ditto.
Before I let you go, though, where can people find you and where can they connect with you?
Absolutely. DrAdamDorsay.com is my website. DrAdamDorsay.com. My book's available on Amazon. It's doing well. It's been blurbed and praised by people like Mel Robbins and Guy Kawasaki and Dan Pink. I'm really grateful. And of course, Lori Gottlieb, who's one of my all-time favorites. You're talking about AJ Brown. AJ Jacobs is the guy who wrote the foreword for it. And I'm so grateful for that. They can find me on YouTube with my 2 TED Talks. Let's see, where else? Of course, on any platform for my podcast, which has had people like Steve Kerr on, and as I mentioned, Temple Grandin, some really, really good folks. And man, just hit me up. Let me know what you think. And if you got any questions, I hope to have some answers.
Again, Adam, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. I appreciate your time.
Nick, right back at you.